Three, two, one, hit it. Welcome to the Dude Catholic Podcast. Today is a very special episode, and this is the part where I always get kind of nervous because I have no idea how to pronounce anything outside of my own last name. So here we go. We have the one and only coach and author Kramer, and you're going to have to correct me on this one, Soderberg.
Hey, you got it, man. Most people get that wrong, but that's big time. You got it right.
No way. Can I hear it from you?
Soderberg, yep.
No way.
Yeah, you got it.
Sweet. First try. All right. So we have a coach, a basketball coach at Millikin University in Illinois. And I believe that's a trade that runs in the family.
For sure. Yep. My dad's a college basketball coach as well. He's been a coach my whole life. He's currently the assistant coach at the University of Virginia, who are still the reigning national champs since there was no tournament this past year. But yeah, he's been a coach my whole life. And as a coach's kid, you either fall in love with the game or you hate the game. And I happen to fall in love with it. So here
Nice.
I am doing the same thing my dad does.
Cool. And that's one of the things that we like to focus on. As a matter of fact, one of our first series was on mentorship. And the impact that a father can have on a son is immense, for better or for worse. And why not start with that?
Yeah.
Just kind of hit the ground running. How has your father's influence affected your faith life, or you growing up and becoming a man? You're a father of three, like myself. We were talking earlier, pre-recording, about our adventures with our kids and their snappy sayings and whatnot. Yep. And how does all that get impacted by your upbringing?
Oh, huge. I mean, for all of us who have fathers, I think our parents are our first kind of image of what you're supposed to be like if your parents are doing the right things. And even if they're not, it's going to lean you in that direction. I've talked to a lot of parents who, will ask me, or, even my players' parents will come to me and say, oh, so-and-so is, he's doing this and that. And I don't know, how do I affect that? Should I, be more, and I always tell them your words a lot of times are going to go in one ear and out the other with your kids. But your example is what is going to hold firm with them. And that rings true for me with my father, in that a lot of what my dad said, I'm sure when I was young, it went one ear out the other and I had nothing to do with it. But what rang true for me, especially later on in my life, was my memories of what my dad did. Me remembering him going to adoration, him going to daily mass, him reading his daily devotional or whatever it may be. Why did he do that? Those examples that hung in my memory, I think were the root of, his impact on my spiritual life, especially, that why would he do that? Why would he do all those things? And then as I got a little bit more mature in my faith life, I pondered those questions and pursued those questions, even though I saw the memories when I was, in grade school. So I think that's an important thing for us dads, especially, to remember that, our kids may not listen to all the words we say, but boy, they're watching every action we make, and we're teaching them what to do or what not to do by our actions.
Nice. And that's huge, when it comes to what we're doing. We're trying to promote a culture where masculinity goes back to the authenticity of what we are, of who we are, and where does our identity come from? It comes from the Father, and so as fathers, we have a mission to point back to the Heavenly Father and to make that a reality in our own households, that we may look like something that God might recognize as his own. And in this scenario where we failed, historically speaking, as a male species, we failed to stand up, we failed to lead our families to God. But it's become that women have been leading our church, and they have enough on their plates. Their job is hard enough that us giving our jobs to them and not taking on the position of leadership that we are to take on.
Mm.
It's just unfair to them. And I don't want to guide this conversation in too many directions. What I do want to do is I want to know what your book is about, because
Yeah.
one of the things that I just kind of got from our conversation is very much related to what we do on this podcast. From what we were talking about, this is a book that definitely appeals to our mission, to what we're talking about. We don't talk about sports all the time. We'll talk about a one-handed catch that won the Super Bowl every once in a while, and the
Right.
kind of
Right.
preparation that it takes. So we'll
Mm.
use sport analogies all the time because they have everything to do with our spiritual life. And I think that's the connection that I saw, between
Yes.
what you do in the book and what we're trying to do. If I'm completely wrong, let me know. But I really do want the audience to kind of get a feel for what the book is about so that they can check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you're right on. I mean, in my opinion, sports kind of transcends all walks of life. The mentality that great athletes have, we want to have that mentality in our spiritual lives, but so often we don't. And I wrote this book for that purpose, into kind of motivate the reader to approach your spiritual life the same way you approach your professional life, or as an athlete you approach being an athlete. And if you do that, then everything else in your life will reap the fruit of your intense spiritual life. And I wanted to write the book in kind of a spiritual journey, chronological format, in that I wrote it in a way that kind of walked you through my spiritual life, but it's not an autobiography in a sense where I just tell you exactly what happens to me. My story's kind of mixed in there. But the first quarter, I call it, to make it a sports reference, the first quarter is called the motivation. And that's just all about falling in love with Christ. And just like in athletics, if you're not motivated through the proper channels, you're going to fail in your pursuit of your goal. And just like in our spiritual life, if you're not motivated the proper way through the love of Christ, you're going to fail in your spiritual pursuits. So that's kind of the start of it. We talk about the second quarter is the trials, about suffering and going through
Mm.
struggles. And I also put my own personal journey of my trial, my struggle. It has some journal entries in there. The third quarter is the truth. And that is where I dive more theological based information, how I kind of came to re-find the Catholic Church and the truth that was in the church, and me coming to the fullness of my Catholic life through research and so on and so forth. And then the final quarter is where I kind of come out as the coach, and it's called the challenge. And that's where I motivate the reader to pursue holiness, to become a saint. So that is what I wanted the book to be, is kind of this walking through a spiritual journey, but being written in a simple way that anybody could read, teenager through, grandma. I wanted everyone to feel like they could connect to it, but I think specifically a male audience could really take some stuff from it, because if we pursue our spiritual lives the way we do our professional life, or as athletes the way we pursue it as athletes, we're going to become the best Catholics we can be. We're going to become then the best fathers and the best husbands, and the best co-workers, and so on and so forth. But it
Yeah.
starts in their spiritual life. So that's kind of what my book is about. And I think it matches perfectly with your guys' mission and your ministry.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's kind of funny because as you were speaking, I was just thinking about the series we just finished, which we kind of comedically, sorry, the English is hard, comedically named "Know Your Worth, Kings," and the first out of the three episodes was on priorities. So when you were talking about that first quarter, the formational thing, like it was just, that episode was sticking out because it was the genesis of the whole series, and it was about just developing yourself and your priorities and getting to know what's important in your life. It kind of comes also from another book by another coach Holtz. Back when I
Ah,
was doing high school, I remember making reference to a book called A Teen's Game Plan for Life,
mm,
and it was all about priorities, and so we started we started talking about those priorities and how when you're young, you have a certain set of priorities because of your state in life. And then when you get a little bit older, well, let's say you're a father, you have different priorities, but it still follows the same pattern: God, family, career, or school, friends. And so with that in mind, you establish what's important and how you're going to lead the rest of your life. Because if
Mm,
you get those screwed up in any way, shape, or form, if you put family before God, things are going to fall apart. And that doesn't sound like a horrible thing, to put family first. But if you don't have the love of the infinite God guiding the way you guide your family, things are going to fall apart because you don't tell God what to do.
yeah.
God tells us what to do. And from there on, even those of us like myself who doesn't like to follow orders, we see the value in those orders, in those commandments, if you may.
It's so funny you mention priorities, because in the fourth quarter of my book, I have a chapter that is just about priorities, and I approach it similarly, but a little bit different. I argue that the way that we put our priorities in that, almost all people, like you just said, is going to say God, family, profession, activities after that. I
Mhm.
argue that it's a little bit off. It's not perfect, because if we do this by priority and put God first, what does that mean? Does 3 hours a day to God, is that enough? I don't think so. It's
No.
it's not what God wants. But
No.
at the same time, as professionals, as fathers, we can't go sit at church for 10 hours a day, because we would neglect our family. So does God want us to? No, no, not at all. But so what I argue is, our priority list shouldn't place God first, but it should place God in every aspect of our life. Every priority should be centered on God. So God in my prayer life, God in my family, God in my profession, God in my hobbies and activities. And that's kind of how I approach the priorities thing. Of course, it's still
Mhm.
God first, but also it's not God separate from my family. It's God in my
In
family. It's God
everything.
in my work. And so I look at the priorities a little bit differently than I've heard anybody else look at it. But I think that's so important, is uniting Christ to every aspect of your life. Not, Christ isn't just a part of my life on Sundays, or when I go to adoration. Christ is a part of my life when I'm at my office working as a coach or as a businessman. Christ is a part of my life, and a part of my priority as a husband and as a father. And I think once you unite that priority of God in your life, unite it to all your other priorities, then your life becomes, just straight and narrow, and you're on the path towards holiness.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of that speaks specifically to Christians, because the way we see God is like that. We don't see God as being in a separate category over here.
Right.
And as a society, we really do value the Greeks and what they did for us, philosophically speaking, and government and all that, because they really set a good foundation. But when you think about the way they think about deities, if you may, they're pantheistic about things, and they can have God over here in the forest, very far
Mm,
away, and we
yeah.
go to God and dedicate some time to God on our terms.
Right.
But in the Christian faith, God is everywhere and in everything that we do. The Benedictines, ora et laboram, pray and work. It's not separate from one another. And I used to be very scrupulous about the way I led my prayers, because sometimes, and by sometimes I mean every single time, my mind would wander off when I was praying the rosary. And so I ended up praying like 15, 20 Hail Marys per mystery, because I was like, no, it doesn't count, because I wasn't completely mindful of the
Yes.
mysteries at the time. And no, it's more like you go out to the beach, and your mission is to sunbathe and to tan. If you fall asleep while you're tanning, the tan is still going to happen.
Yes.
It's more about God's grace than it is about my own investing of time or my
Mm,
attention or whatever it may be. And yes, attention is important, but God also knows that He made me with ADD, so I have a certain limitation there. And so long as I am present, I am willing, and I am working towards that goal, He's going
yeah.
to do the rest. So God being the top priority doesn't mean, as you correctly stated, doesn't mean that I'm going to be spending 10 hours a day in church. It's
Right.
that I am church. My family is church. Everything I do has an eternal consequence to it.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I'm like, I'm not even going to argue with what you said, because it's like one and the same. It's just really unspooling what it means to put God first.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. And you talking about pursuing, you said, oh, I sometimes lose track of things or I lose focus. And I think you're right on when you talk about the idea of as long as we're pursuing, as long as we're striving, as long as we're doing the best we can to give God our all. I think that's what He's asking us to do. It's not necessarily that you find success or that you're so good at praying or that you achieve all these marvelous things. It's that you strive to do His will and to glorify His name through whatever you're doing that day. And you hit it right on the head when you said that. That's what the Christian life is all about, is that pursuit, is running the race to win.
Amen to that. And yeah, and one of the things that kind of sticks out as you're saying that is the idea that hustle out succeeds talent.
Yes.
And I wanted to get your input on discipline. I mean, that's one of the ideas that I had in mind when I saw that you wanted to have a conversation about these themes in your book. I'm like, oh man, discipline is so important to what we do.
Mm.
Especially because I lack it in many things, and so
Yeah.
I want to make sure that people know, when they hear our podcast, like, we're not perfect, like we're just a couple of knuckle draggers
Right.
trying to do their best today, because yesterday didn't look as good, so we're going to make the rest of our time here good. But in order to make that into something good, into something that, like I said before, that God might recognize as His own, we need to have a certain discipline.
Yeah, yeah. So whenever the word discipline comes up for me, I always think of something my dad taught me, and my dad was actually my college coach, so I played for my dad for 2 years. But he was a really intense, focused guy, and a lot of people would ask, "Man, your dad is so intense. You guys must have a lot of rules on the team, right?" And they'd be surprised to hear that we only had 3 rules for our team. The 3 rules were show up on time, and do the best you can. Those were the 3 rules.
Wow.
And he always said, if you learn to do those 3 things for the rest of your life, you're going to beat out 90% of the population. And he's right on. And I think that crosses so profoundly over to our spiritual life, in that, especially in the prayer life, if you can learn to show up every day, just come to prayer every day, show up on time, not necessarily like you're going to get struck down by lightning if you don't show up to church on time, but set a specific time. If you just say, I'm going to pray sometime today, it's probably not going to happen. But if you say, I'm going to pray at 8 a.m. today, and show up on time, and then do the best you can, your spiritual life will take off. That three level discipline will get you where you want to be. And the idea of just doing the best you can, that's, some days prayer is going to be hard. Some days you're
Yeah.
not going to want to do it. Some days you're going to feel sick. Some days you feel like you don't have enough time, but do the best you can. Even if you get distracted, even if your mind's on other things, do the best you can. So that idea of discipline, those 3 rules kind of always pop into my head, of what my dad taught me and our team. Show up on time, and do the best you can every day. And that discipline will become easier and easier. Your prayer life will become easier and easier. Your relationship with Christ will grow, and you'll get to where you want to go.
Beautiful. And that is also contagious. We as men especially, we thrive on tribe. And that didn't mean to rhyme there, but we do really thrive when we're in a group. When we have our tribe well selected, and
Yeah.
they have the same values that we do, it just kind of builds on itself. And I mean, when you speak, I can go in so many different directions. I mean, it just light bulbs left and right, but
Right. Right.
but definitely that discipline. And I love that, those 3 things, so simple, and so many ways that a person can grow out of that.
Right. The rule number 3, do the best you can. I'd like to expand on that a little bit more. What does that actually mean? And what this leads me to is the title of my book, fill your cup for Christ. And again, another thing that my dad taught me, and what inspired the title of my book was a story that my dad told a group of campers, and I was one of them when I was in 6th grade. Really briefly, he brought out 3 different size cups. One was like a 64-ounce guzzler, one was a medium drinking glass, kind of 12 ounces, and one was like a Dixie cup. And basically, he went on to say, I don't care how much potential you have. All I care is how much water you put in your cup, or how much you get out of that potential. And I think in today's world, we're so trained that success means, winning. Success means making a lot of money. Success means having a big house or a good looking wife, or whatever it may be. That's success. But that's false. That's not true. Success, real success, is getting the most out of your potential, the most out of what God has given you. And that kind of in lines with rule number 3, doing the best you can, filling your cup to the top for Christ's sake. And that analogy that my dad gave me inspired my book. It inspired me as an athlete for my whole life, but only later on did I realize how profound that is in my spiritual life, and as a father and as a husband and so on and so forth. If I can fill my cup each day as a Catholic, as a dad, as a father, I am a success. Whether I fail or succeed in the world's eyes, if I fill my cup to the top for Christ, that is a success.
People may need to check their pulse if they're not pumped right now at hearing this, because dude, like this is motivating right here. We're not. It's a beautiful thing that God is not asking me to do someone else's best.
Right.
God is asking me to do my best.
Absolutely.
And that cup analogy is beautiful. I'm a teacher, so I man, especially the first day of class, like it's my job to inspire the heck out of those kids, and
Right.
let them know that they can succeed, and that to let them know that I'm only going to expect their best, not anyone
Correct.
else's best. And so I think I may steal that cup analogy and give them that
Please
visual, if that's
Please
all
do.
right.
And
Cool.
it's funny. I mean, it's funny because I think so often as Christians, we look at maybe the influence we have, or the abilities that we've been given, and we might say, well, I'm not a famous singer or a preacher. I just am a janitor, or I'm not good at talking, or I'm not a good communicator, so I shouldn't preach the gospel. No. That's irrelevant. Whether your influence is that of a famous preacher or that of a coal miner, irrelevant. Fill your cup to the top for Christ. Whatever you're doing in life, do it for his sake, for his glory, and by doing so, you are fulfilling his will for your life.
And it's funny that one of the first occupations you mentioned was a janitor. The janitor just happened to be there at a time when I was struggling to put on a tie for a job interview. I had to learn how to tie a tie from the janitor, who took pity on me when he saw me struggling to put on a tie.
Beautiful.
I went to that job interview and I nailed it, and I'm not going to forget that ever. I didn't even ask his name. He didn't tell me. He didn't care who I was. He was there, and he witnessed the gospel to me in that one simple act.
Yes.
So
Wow.
his influence is going to carry on, not just to me, but to my children, who I determined were not going to have to learn from anyone else. As amazing and as great as I thought that act of charity was, as much of an impact it had, it actually had the impact of me saying, my kids are not going to learn from anyone else how to do these things. They're not going to learn from anyone else how to dribble a ball, how to change the oil in their car. I mean, all that stuff is going to come from me. And I've learned from others, and I am immensely thankful for their influence and their charity when it comes to what I didn't have. So when you're talking about influence, we all have influence. We can all touch an average of 1,000 lives, because we know about 1,000 people. So if that company that had me selling knives once upon a time was correct, we are connected to about 1,000 people. Yeah, I wanted to get your input on the husband component, because that's that's the most important human relationship the male who is married has.
Yeah. I mean, I think just as God is interconnected with all my other priorities, I think at the same time some of my other priorities are also interconnected. So I think, you mentioned that a lot of fathers maybe tend to say, okay, my biggest responsibility is my kids, or the rearing of my children, or raising them right. But that's a little off. I think what you said is correct, that first our love of our wife is so important, but that crosses over to the raising of our kids. And I think about this often. The way I love my wife and the way my children see me interact with my wife is going to be how my boys love their wife one day.
Mhm.
And the way that I love my wife and the way that I treat her is going to be the way my daughter expects a man to treat her. So I think that crossover is so significant, in that the way that I love my wife is certainly going to be the way that my children expect their relationship, if one day they have one, to be. And just as Christ loves his church, that is the way we are called to love our wife. And I think I'm so profoundly obsessed with the Eucharist and the gift of the Eucharist. Um, and that gift, that sacrament, has made me contemplate the way I approach my marriage so much more. When you think of the Eucharist as marriage, as the consummation of a marriage in the sexual act, two flesh becoming one, Christ giving his entire self to us so that we may receive his entire self into us. When you start to contemplate that as a part of your marriage, then you say, if I am not giving my whole self to my wife, then I am falling short of what Christ deems as marriage, what Christ thinks the husband should be to his wife. So my sort of love of the Eucharist, I think, has made me contemplate and at least attempt to be a better husband.
Absolutely, and I think they're so connected. There's no dichotomy there. There's just both
Yeah.
and and it's just beautiful how you said that. And you mentioned that earlier about the impact that your dad had on you. He had a close relationship with the Lord and the Blessed Sacrament, and that had an impact
Mm,
that we can't measure.
yeah.
Just us spending some time with the Eucharist, you can tell the difference in a human being who's just spent an hour with our Lord. And
Yes.
that all comes from the source and summit of the faith, which is our Lord and Savior in the Blessed Sacrament. It's not a symbol.
No.
It's not a joke. Like the fact that 30% of Catholics, only 30% of Catholics believe in the true presence. Like, it could be alarming that they don't, or it could be encouraging that 30% actually do, because even if we
Mm,
don't understand, our Lord didn't say take and understand, because we won't be able to. He said take and eat.
yes.
And,
Yes.
and we can let God do the rest of the work, because we're not going to be able to comprehend it, and we're not going to be able to meet the standards that we need to meet, in the eyes of God. But we are well on our way if we bring him in so that he can pick up and do the necessary work.
You dived into a little bit of the Catholic truth that we have come to find, but that's something that I really wanted to get into in my book. There was a part of me, and there was a bit of a temptation when I started writing it, to make it just non-denominational, just Christian, and not
Hmm.
have a Catholic theme to it. But I rejected that temptation, because the Catholic Church has become such a huge part of my life, and the formation of me as a true disciple of Christ, or at least pursuing that. But what I always tell people, in in Catholic circles and even non-Catholic circles who ask about it, is, what do I love most about the church? And of course, first and foremost is the Eucharist, and we covered that, and the importance of our faith. But the second part of it is, and this is the athlete in me, and the coach in me coming out. But frankly, the Catholic Church is hard.
Yes.
It's hard being a Catholic. Okay,
Hmm.
it's not easy, because our church is not watered down to make things easy. And the analogy I give in my book is, we're training right now, we're all training to be Olympians, okay? We're all training for the gold medal, which is heaven, okay? If let's say we're all want to be Olympians and we got the 2024 Olympics coming up in whatever 4 years and we want to be a gold medalist, we're going to select a trainer. We're all going to select a trainer. And let's say 3 trainers come to us. The first one says, hey, this training regiment's going to be, it's going to be, you know, a little bit hard, but not too bad. It's going to be pretty easy for you. You're not going to have to change anything that you normally do. We're going to work out once or twice a week, but this is going to be pretty easy and fun. The second one says, nah, this is going to be a little bit harder. You're going to train, 5 days a week, 1 hour a day. You're not going to have to do much different. For you, it's going to be a little challenging, but not too difficult. And then the third one says, this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. We are going to train for 7 days a week for the next 4 years up until the Olympics. I'm going to change the way you eat, the way you think, the way you act. You're not going to be able to do this, that, or the other. You're going to want to quit. You're going to get, so sick of me. You're going to think I'm crazy. But if you stick with me, I've trained other Olympians in the past. You know that I've trained gold medalists. If you stick with me through this training, you are going to win a gold medal. Now, I always ask people at the end of that, who would you select as your trainer? And unless you're a sissy or a spineless coward, you're going to pick trainer number 3. And why are we going to pick trainer number 3? We pick trainer number 3 because we know that when you're pursuing greatness, when you're pursuing something that is so worthwhile, it's not going to come easy. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. And trainer number 3 is the Catholic Church. That is what the Catholic Church is. The Catholic Church says, we have trained countless saints. We know what it takes to get you there. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes you're going to think we're crazy. Sometimes you're going to want to quit. But if you stick it out, you are going to get the gold medal. And that is what I've come to find in the church, and that is what I've so embraced, because there's so many times that going to confession or saying the rosary or adoration or why do I have to use natural family planning, all these different things that the Catholic Church teaches that no one else does that are really hard, those are helping me get to heaven. And I love it. I love the grind and the struggle and the challenge that brings me. So that is kind of my last thought, my very Catholic and very coach thought.
I don't know about you, but I got a little lion inside my chest roaring right now as we speak, man. We just hit the tip of the iceberg right here.
That's
So
right.
hopefully everyone that's listening will actually go ahead and pick up a copy of the book so that we can grow. And especially for our audience, we talk about embracing the suck all the time. We talk about
That's right.
taking the straight and narrow, the hardest path. Like it's for a reason. It's because, if anything, because we're men. And we know that stuff that's worth doing is going to be hard.
Right.
But we're also hopefully we also know that we're not alone. And we talked, Ramon and I, my brother and I, we talk about the prayer that we do, how we have an ongoing novena, and we're always praying for the people that are listening, the people that are not listening, the people that have come in contact with the ministry in any way, shape, or form. And as of today, we're at 1,048 days of prayer. Now, as you've come in contact with us, that you're being prayed for by my brother and I, a couple of little knuckle draggers in California. We're doing our best to lead our lives in a way that Christ would want us to. And anyone who's come in contact with us is part of that. It's part of that crew, that tribe, whatever you may be, that we're trying to reach heaven and bring as many people with us as we can. And is it going to be easy? Heck no.
Right.
But is it worth it? Yes. Every
Beautiful.
single day it is.
Beautiful.
So how can our people get their hands on one of those copies of your book?
Yeah. So you can find the title on Amazon, Fill Your Cup for Christ, and then, obviously my name, Kramer Soderberg, or you can go to my website, kramersoderberg.com. There you can get a book and, see some other media stuff about me. And then I'm also on Instagram, a Catholic Coach, and I try to put out similar stuff that we're talking about: motivation, Catholic information, just ways to kind of, like you said, help people, strive to holiness and one day make it to heaven.
Awesome. And we're going to have some stuff. We're going to link you on the notes of this podcast. When it comes out, we're also going to put a promo post on the Dude Catholic Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're more active on Instagram, so you'll see a lot of links there, so that people can get in contact with you and get a hold of your material and just
Absolutely.
make this group of men that's aiming to reach heaven and bring their families and everyone else along with them, so that our community can get bigger and that we can pray for each other even more and encourage each other to keep going and to win that race. So until next time, Kramer, thank you so much for joining us, brother. We really appreciate you being here with us, and to just for the knowledge of knowing that there's someone out there who's living the life, who's inspiring people, and who's doing their best to raise their family, to love their bride as Christ has loved the church.
Thanks so much for having me. God bless you guys. You'll be in my prayers.
Now, I've been a coach at this high school for 15 years, and I have never seen a performance like that. No, ever!